So, Councillor Rainey, we do have quorum. Yeah, so we can proceed. Yes, please.
Okay, we're ready to go. So welcome everybody to the O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting Thursday, November 21st. It is now 10:05, what do you have, Becky? 10:05, I guess? 10:01. To call the meeting to order, the meeting will be live streamed, recorded, and available on the internet by visiting the county's website. The meeting will also be conducted as a hybrid meeting with in-person and virtual participation in accordance to the county's procedural bylaw. And if you could read the traditional land acknowledgement, Becky.
Thank you, Councillor Brainy. So we will begin this board meeting by acknowledging that the County of Prince Edward is on traditional land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this land. Today, the County of Prince Edward is still home to many First Nations and Métis people, and we are grateful to have an opportunity to meet here, work, and continue stewardship on this land.
Thank you. Do we have a pecuniary disclosure, pecuniary of interest in general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on. Could I have someone move or confirm the agenda? Casey, and second by Councillor Roberts. If you could just read that out then, Casey. Perfect. And could we have someone, we have the adoption of minutes from our September 19th meeting. Could we have somebody move that? Robert moved it, and Councillor Roberts there seconded.
Move that the minutes of the O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting held September 19th, 2024 be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Robert. All in favor? We're good with that. Perfect. We'll move on then to our presentations. We have Janet, am I pronouncing your last name right? Feaver, Janet? Correct? Municipal Policing Specialist to address our board regarding the O.P.P. Municipal Policing Bureau. If you could look forward to having you. Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Very, very low.
Okay, I'll move a little bit closer, perhaps.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'll do my best to speak directly into the mic. So thank you very much for being here today. As mentioned, my name is Janet Feaver. I'm a municipal policing specialist with the O.P.P. I have a colleague here with me today who will introduce himself in a few moments. I have 24 years on with the OPS, just a little bit about me, 8 years with the broader public service, and then roughly 16 with the O.P.P. And I'm really lucky to have had the opportunity to work in a number of different areas like fleet supply and weapons, policy, the academy, and strategic planning. And all of that serves me well here in this role with my colleague as we come and talk to you today about the O.P.P., how we operate, and how our billing model works. So I've got a short presentation here for you today. It worked when we were testing it. We could go to the overview slide. There we go. So a short presentation for you today where I'll talk to you about O.P.P. service delivery, our cost recovery, efficiencies, as well as the Community Safety and Policing Act. And then we'll go through any questions at the end if anyone has any questions. So the first slide, I think it's working now, thank you. The first slide is of a picture of our Commissioner, Thomas Carrique. And this is our vision statement, Safe Communities, a Secure Ontario. And they've done a really good job of reflecting the O.P.P's unique dual mandate in this very short vision statement. Because the O.P.P, the dual mandate is for local policing, municipal policing, as well as provincial responsibilities. Municipal police services, they focus on the municipal side. So we have a unique mandate in the O.P.P. Okay, And to talk to you about how the OPP delivers our services, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Sergeant Rob Griffin.
Thanks, Janet. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. Really appreciate being here. Sergeant Rob Griffin, Municipal Policing Bureau. I've had an interesting career, much like Janet. I come from 3 different police services, actually. I've worked across the province for municipal police services as well as the O.P.P. Bring a different perspective in that regard to our bureau. Janet started us off there by talking about our vision, and I think it's important when we talk about vision, strategic plans. You know, on our way out here, we were actually reviewing yours, and there's a lot of similarities with customer service and the way we deliver products to the communities that we look after. So, you know, the vision, safe communities, a secure Ontario. I didn't really know what that meant until I joined the O.P.P, and basically what that means is the O.P.P does 2 things. They do policing the province and policing municipalities. So, that being said, we have to do that in tandem. So when we partner with communities like Prince Edward, we partner with people with a shared vision of public safety where we can come in and work together with that common goal of having a safe community. So how do we do that and separate those 2 responsibilities? We do it through what we call O.P.P, Integrated Service Delivery. I apologize if some of you are experts on this and I don't know that, but just keeping this very high level just to let everyone in the room and online know that we are doing 2 roles, the provincial role and the municipal role, but we're doing it in tandem and in partnership. So with integrated service delivery, that basically means that when you see a police officer out in your community in a police car, it could mean they're doing one of 2 things. They could be working on a call for service for the municipality, or they could be looking after a provincial duty, whether that be traffic control, a ride program, whatever other investigations they have on the go. So a dual mandate there, working together with the municipality. And the benefit of that is when the bottom line is cost, right? You know, policing's become expensive. The expectations of society that has been placed on policing to, you know, accommodate lots of different things and new roles. It's impossible to do it alone as the province, and that's why these partnerships work so well. Being able to split the cost of detachments, personnel, and salaries, things like that, allow us to do a lot more with a lot less. So integrated service delivery, we do have a tracking system so we know how to build that out. Currently, there is a split, what they call a provincial municipal split for costing of O.P.P services. So they say that I think the current split is around 49-51. So that means that 49% of the time out on the road, when you see that officer, they're doing municipal work, and the other 51% of the time, they're doing provincial work. So that comes in a big part of when billing happens, because when the billing happens, we want to make sure that we're not billing out provincial responsibilities to the municipality. So we'll get further into it, how the base service works, how billing for calls to service works as the slides move on. But to keep it high level, we do have a tracking system. So in the car nowadays, when a police officer is out on the road, we have a system we refer to as an acronym DAR, and it is Daily Activity Reporting. So every time a police officer goes to a call for service, the dispatcher and communications center will place them on that call, and it'll track the time. And when it's tracking the time, it also knows which area to bill that call to. So when our analysts are at the end of the year doing all their statistics and sorting through data, they can separate whether that was provincial or municipal. Another really neat thing with integrated service delivery and how this DAR system works is they use a time standard. So what they'll do is they'll take, say, a simple call for service like an assault, and they'll take an average time across the province for what that takes to do, and we'll get into this later as well, but they'll use an average time standard to bill for that call. So sometimes you'll be driving down the street and you'll see 6 police officers off to the side of the road and you'll be like, wow, does it really take 6 police officers to do that? Or what are we paying for here? But at the end of the day, you're not paying for 6 police officers, you're paying for integrated service delivery, you're paying for the time it takes for 1 police officer to do that call. And then all the other police officers are what they call assisting officers. So they'll come by, make sure everything's okay, or help where they need to. But the time standard is based on that initial report-taking officer. So I'm going to move on a little bit from that. So let me see here, because we're going to talk about that. Am I doing something wrong here? Oh, is it? There we go. So financial recoveries and provincial responsibilities. I'll let Janet talk about these, and then I'll come back and talk more about calls for service.
Rob? Yeah, so as Rob's been talking about the provincial side and the municipal side, and when we look at the dollars associated with those services, in 2025, the O.P.P. estimates that we will need to facilitate the government recovering $497.4 million from municipalities province-wide. And on the other side, we look at provincial responsibilities, the things that are not recovered from municipalities. So while on the municipal side, you pay for frontline officers, supervisory staff, support positions, and ODOE, which would include things like training, vehicles, uniforms, and equipment. On the provincial side, we'll get into it a little bit more. Things like traffic safety, investigations, specialized response teams, and intelligence gathering, those are done on the provincial side, and there is no cost recovery from municipalities for this $1.0569 billion that we estimate to spend in 2025. We're going to break that down a little bit more. So as I mentioned, the municipal side, as per legislation, the O.P.P. is required to identify how much municipal policing costs by municipality and to facilitate the government's recovery of those funds. As mentioned, that includes frontline officers, supervision, civilian support, as well as our communications operators, provincial police academy, our guards, IT, uniforms, and equipment. Municipalities do pay for these services under legislation. When we look at the provincial side, talk about things that are not, we do not cost recover for. Trying to advance this slide here. I'm so sorry, Becky, it doesn't seem to be working for me. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Thank you. And so provincial responsibilities, the other side of the O.P.P. and the services that we deliver, we estimate will cost just over $1 billion in 2025. And that includes policing all of the province's highways, waterways, and trails, the King's Highways. It includes aircraft enforcement. It includes our specialty response teams, the TRU, the ERT, the emergency response teams, canine, aviation. We've got covert operations as well as investigation support. Those services are delivered with no cost recovery from municipalities. So when there is, say, a lost individual and there's an aircraft coming in to search for someone and there's all kinds of boots on the ground looking for a lost individual, that's a provincial responsibility, and although the community may have seen a great police response, they're not paying for that response because it's a provincial responsibility. There, it worked that time. There we go. And so how do we break it down? How do we keep things straight, make sure it's transparent and fair for our municipalities? We break down that 497 million, sorry, 497 million, my mistake. We break that down using the O.P.P. billing model. And what that billing model does is it divides the bill into 3 categories. There's base services, calls for service, and other costs as well. Base services are charged to every municipality based on the property count they have within their boundaries. So every property in Ontario that the O.P.P. polices, the base cost is $189.44. And that is for legislated services, proactive policing, training, and other administrative duties. That's a flat rate. Then we move into calls for service, and this would be more reactive policing when someone calls 911, calls detachment, and they need police support. This is for crime calls, statutes, collisions, and general calls for service. Rob mentioned the working groups and the time standards associated with those calls for service. We have a slide coming up to talk about that, and we'll break that down a little bit more. Other costs are also added to the bill, and that is it depends on each municipality's arrangement, whether they're paying for accommodation and cleaning expenses. There may be additional services negotiated by the municipality that they pay for. There's also overtime and court security in the other services. So that's how we break down the costs provincially, and then we break it down municipally using that DAR system. So I'm going to move on. This is a picture of a municipal bill. It is not the one associated with this municipality. This is for any town in Ontario. It's an anonymous bill. And what we've done is color-coded this bill to align with the colors on the last slide. So base services that we talked about, the proactive policing, and I mentioned that we charge per household for that. So we see that in this municipality, there are 17,751 properties. They are all charged an equal flat rate of $189, and we see the total cost on the right. The next box is calls for service. This is the reactive side of policing, when someone calls the police and they attend a call. That is worked out by working group that Rob's going to talk about in a moment. We'll talk about how we break down those calls for service and make sure that municipalities are paying only for the type of call that has been called in. The bottom box is overtime, contract enhancements, court security, prisoner transportation, and accommodation and cleaning services. These are the other services that are charged to municipalities. In this instance, the municipal cost is $343.28 per household in this municipality. While this is not Prince Edward's bill, I believe there is a good comparison to be made here. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rob to talk about the working groups. I don't know what just happened. There we go. Here we go.
Thanks, Janet. And a good point by Janet. That is a very close bill. I think within $1, I think, per household on that one. So it's a very, very close comparison. This next slide that's up here, I used to call this my favorite slide, and when I was doing this for police services boards. And fun fact here, this is actually the very first detachment board presentation that we've done since the turnover. So Prince Edward County will be remembered always as our very first detachment board meeting. So thanks for that. So this slide here, this is page 5 of any bill in Ontario. So when we have our breakdown, you'll see the very first page was the page that we just had up a moment ago with Janet, showing the breakdown between base, service, calls for service, and other direct operating costs. I call this my favorite slide because as a police officer and as a manager, when you want to take a quick snapshot of what's happening in your community, and this is specifically relevant for the board here and council, if you go to page 5, you can see all these working groups. There's 9 working groups here. And the thing with the 9 working groups is within each of these groups is every call for service that's happened in your community. So as you move on in your bill past page 5, you'll see a breakdown of all the calls. So those calls will be assigned one of these groups. So for example, you see operational 1, and you'll see that those calls are very high. That's completely normal, because an operational 1 call is something police officers do every day, like a non-criminal neighbor dispute, something that doesn't have charges associated to it. It's the kind of faster calls that we do, where we come out to assist, make sure everything's okay, and then we move on. You'll see right below there's operational 2. Originally, there was only operational 1, and in operational 1, we say, hey, well, there are some quick calls, but there is even calls that are even faster. So to make it more fair and more transparent, we found calls that took a really quick time, something like a false alarm, and we moved it to another category with a lower time standard. So you'll notice that a time standard on an operational call is 3.9 hours, where an operational 2 is 1.7, so almost half the time. So that's just a way to, break it down, make it a bit more, I guess you could say, fair, instead of grouping them all together. So when we look across, this is done on 4-year averages every year, just to keep billing consistent and projectable. So when we're doing our budgets and everything every year, we can expect to know where we're going to be at based on these 4-year averages. So if all of a sudden there's a massive spike in calls for service, you don't have to necessarily worry about that next year because it'll roll through on that average over every 4 years. So you can see in 4-year average column A, right there you have starting at drug possession 36, moving all the way down for your averages over the 4 years. Unique thing too you can see in this is you can see where calls were less during COVID and times when we weren't out doing the proactive things that we were doing, and now things are kind of coming back to the norm. So you can see the increases. Traffic, provincial statutes, all the statistics are there. So when you are making decisions and you are doing your overview of policing, you can come to this quick overview and say, hey, look, this is looking good. You can see decreases, increases, and whatnot. Going to the next slide here. Oh, wrong way. Here we go. Year-end adjustments. I'll bring it back to Janet to talk about year-end adjustments.
Really quick on this slide. The O.P.P. operates on a, the bill is issued in advance, so in 2025, the bills come out in September of 2024, and we reconcile the previous complete year, which would be 2023. So there's a delay in the reconciliation to allow for the analysis of one complete year of data. It also involves a reconciliation of costs for things like overtime, salary, benefits. They're estimated and then reconciled in the reconciliation year.
So the next slide that you're looking at, we just put this up as a quick snapshot because this is individual municipal cost overview. There's more to this slide. This slide comes from OPP.ca. I want to talk about OPP.ca because much like your community about transparency and customer service, we want to make sure that municipalities across Ontario have all the information they need. So when you go to OPP.ca and you go into the search and you search municipal policing, it'll bring you to a page with tons of tools, calculators, things that you can make comparisons from your communities across the province. So this tool here is individual municipality cost overview. I'm not sure if anyone in the room's had a chance to go in and play with this, but you can actually pick any municipality you want and put it into this graph, and it'll create all the costs going back 4 or 5 years of what the increases have been, what the cost per property are, populations, property counts. So all the data that we have is publicly available here. There's also calls for service calculators where you can go in and adjust your calls for service, see how that would affect your bill. There's webinars on there. So tons of information on that OPP.ca Municipal Policing Bureau section. So this is just one example of where we can see the breakdown of Prince Edward. This is the 2024 data going back 3 years. I think it even goes further. It's just cut off on the screen because it's actually a long portrait view. A landscape view instead of a portrait view. So you can see Prince Edward and what your costs were last year, population. Most of the population's updated every year from census data. So this is usually all up to date by the end of the year for each municipality. Cost for property, you can see here, this is a snapshot. I'm glad we were able to get all the 2025 data for you here. That's all still being rolled out. There's a lot of stuff occurring right now at the ministry level to release new numbers and stuff like that. So our cost per property average is in orange along the bottom. So you can see the consistency provincial average back in 2020, 356. Coming across to 2025 where we've had that increase of 399. So across the province, the average cost per property for 2025 is 399, and I believe Prince Edward's in at 342, I think it is. So your municipality's still much below the provincial average. And again, available on OPP.ca. This here, efficiency. So in the background, we talk about our priorities too as the O.P.P. for things we want to do to improve, and it's that pursuit for excellence, so to speak. We focus a lot on our work as one of our priorities, and our work meaning, supplying our officers with the best tools to do their job, helping municipalities save money as we try to be more efficient. We have a working group within the O.P.P. that are constantly developing new technologies. As O.P.P, you know, we're very technology forward. We believe in modernizing of technologies and legislation to make things more affordable and cost effective. So this year, this is the most recent efficiencies released from our efficiencies unit. And you can see things like call diversion, mental health diversion. So what these things mean is these are things that we've done to divert calls for service. So if somebody calls in, say for a mental health call, and it's something that can be done with a crisis worker, we now have the ability to have a dispatcher or call taker take that call and send it directly to an expert in that field, like a crisis worker at the point, instead of having an officer deployed out, sent out calls for service, which frees up officers' time and effectively reduces calls for service. Big thing too that we're really trying to encourage, we got this lovely thing called the internet, right? So, you know, things like crimes that occurred historically, like a damage to property or mischief, we can now do that online instead of having an officer come out where there's no evidentiary value. You know, why go out if there's no evidence? And we can do this over the phone. There's a lot of really neat initiatives occurring across the province, pilot projects to become more efficient this way. Just even when you reduce an officer driving 45 minutes to go to an address and 45 minutes back to really just talk to somebody, there's all these great alternatives to save and be more efficient. And again, these are available online as well to look at. We did pack a lot of information into the slides. And you know, by all means, keep these slides and use them as a bit of a resource as well. You're free to use any of this material that's in here. It's all publicly available. So a great tool to reference back to if you're doing any reports or anything for your board. Next slide here. Community Policing, Community Safety and Policing Act. I'll let Janet get into that one.
So the Community Safety and Policing Act, as we all know, just came into effect this year. And there are some big changes. No changes to what you see on the ground, frontline policing. It hasn't changed. What's changed are things like some of the administrative stuff and some of the frameworks that we operate under. So some notable changes with the CSPA include the elimination of Section 10 contracts. That references the previous language we had around a contract and a non-contract municipality. This new legislation eliminates the difference between those, and it now puts municipalities on a more even playing field where every municipality can apply for certain grants from the ministry. Previously, grant eligibility could sometimes be restricted to Section 10 or contract municipalities. The CSPA has also introduced a number of new pieces of legislation that the O.P.P is operating under. So one is Section 17 for additional services. This is where a municipality contracts with the O.P.P for services over and above adequate and effective policing. There are how many? Approximately 40 officers who are over and above adequate and effective policing under Section 17. Section 14 arrangements are arrangements with other police services for resource sharing and partnerships with other police services to provide certain services. It introduced O.P.P detachment boards, which you're very familiar with that. There's a focus on First Nations in the new legislation. We have new reporting requirements. I understand we'll be going over some of that today. Introduced the Inspectorate of Policing, and it updated some standards and training. So it did not change what frontline policing looks like from the O.P.P, but it changed a lot of the legislation in the background that we operate under. And the last slide I have for you, second last slide, pardon me, this is the contact information for the ministry representative who's the police services advisor for this area. If you have questions about the CSPA, the O.P.P is happy to provide information that we have, but sometimes it's best from the ministry. And so Graham White is able to provide support to this board at the provincial level, and he's with the Inspectorate of Policing. Another resource that I'm sure you're familiar with is the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, and we've got a link in the presentation to their website as well. And finally, the last slide has my contact information. It's not coming up there, but it is, oh, there it is. Contact information is right there. That's how you can reach me direct. It goes to my work cell phone that's right here. You don't go through an automated menu where you have to hit a bunch of keys to find a person. You get a person right away at the end of this phone number, or feel free to email me. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Janet, Rob, for your time and presentation. Do we have any questions? Casey, why don't we go to you first?
Thank you very much.
I cannot hear Casey.
No, can I?
Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. I'm not a budget expert, but I'm trying to get a handle on the 2025 provincial estimate of $497.4 million for municipal policing service recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand it, that costing is continuing in terms of numbers that are being provided to municipalities. Is that correct?
The bills have been distributed for 2025, yes, and they are billing estimates for 2025 that they include the reconciliation from 2023. So yes, the bills have come out.
And I'm trying to determine what the link is between the ratification on July 18, 2024 of the O.P.P. collective agreement, which went back to January 1st, 2023, with a 4.75 increase in 2023 for frontline officers, 4.5 in 2024, and then 2.5 for 2025, and how that retroactive in the shadow of Bill 144 is impacting on the costing.
There are a number of impacts, a number of factors that factor into the increase for 2025 bills. The most significant is certainly the negotiated agreement that you're speaking about. So the reason there is a larger increase on the 2025 bill is because, as mentioned, there's a reconciliation for 2023. The initial 23 estimates were based on legislation that implemented a 1% increase. So that was the calculation used to calculate the 2023 bill. Now, when we have a new collective agreement that goes back, it's retroactive, there's a reconciliation that needs to occur to make up for that salary difference in 2023.
And so while the municipality would have been the beneficiary of lower costing when Bill 144 was in effect, we now have a compression as there's catch up, and anyone who's been involved in collective bargaining will know that the agreement of July of this year, a significant issue would have been impact and deprivation during the unconstitutional period of Bill 144. But I take it there is no provincial eating of part of that cost, or even an attempt to give a more progressive costing, given the very rich 2023 and 2024 retro.
We understand that this agreement has placed a lot of pressure on municipalities. We acknowledge that, and we know that it's that catch-up period for 2023 and 2024. So the reconciliations will be reflected in the future bills. That said, I do know that this is a provincial concern. Municipalities across the province have raised concerns. The O.P.P. is right now, we are recovering funds as we've been directed under legislation. If there's going to be a change in that, that's outside of the the O.P.P.
Sister municipalities, Guelph, Aurelia, Seguin Township, have all put their hands up
Many have.
in terms of being in a state of discontent. I mean, the history of this is that the OPPA and Management Board stood off to the side watching whether Bill 144 was going to be lawful or not. And we didn't know until February 12th, 2024, when the Court of Appeal upheld the unconstitutionality and the government walked away from a leave application to the Supreme Court of Canada, that in fact we would get this compression we're now faced with the retroactive at the higher levels for 2023 and 2024. To your knowledge, are there discussions between the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards and the government on amelioration of this?
I'm not able to speak to conversations that OAPSB may be having with other parties. I don't know who they're speaking with. I do know that concerns have been raised provincially, and that provincially they are deciding how to deal with these challenges municipalities are facing.
We were very indebted to our municipal clerk for the preparation of the budget that we passed on July 11, 2024 onto council for their budget considerations due to start imminently. The numbers that our municipal clerk had as of July, are the numbers now different?
I am unable to speak to what your clerk had on hand. I don't know what numbers they were speaking to in July. I can say that
Put differently, have you been providing numbers to municipalities after, say, July 1st, 2025, referable to their 2025 estimates?
So in the summer, a notice did go out saying that the agreement had been ratified and there would be an impact on municipal bills. Municipal bills went out October, I believe, so that's when the actual bills were released.
So we would have to update then the budget that we're passing to council as a result.
Yes. Yep, please.
Add to this, because you know, I appreciate your question and what you're saying, because it's something that we're hearing all throughout the province. You know, it's really difficult because we're legislated to cost recover based on what the ministry has directed us to do. And I understand budgets. I've been around for a while. I know it's hard when your budget's about to roll out and then you get, oh, this is more, right? And then what we expected. And you know, there's no secret that municipalities have been speaking to the ministry. And, you know, I was reading an article in the paper yesterday, Public Information, you know, that there are discussions going on. And, you know, the Sol Gen in those articles has been quoted to say that they're working on a solution. They're working on something. Are we privy to that? Not yet.
Fair enough. Right. It's just, I think.
But you're right.
It's important for us to publicly speak to this issue
for sure,
as a municipality that's also impacted.
Absolutely. And we feel for you too, because, you know, we're partners in this community safety, and you know, we want you to have all the information that you need to have to make your proper budgets and to make sure that your constituents out there don't get any surprises. So it's no secret there's talks going on. The ministry is working with municipalities. I'm hoping that something or some announcement comes out sooner than later of what is going to said based on these articles. So we will see. I don't think it's going to be too long because, like you said, it's budget time. It's budget time across the province. So, you know, if there's going to be an announcement, I would anticipate that it would be coming sooner than later. So, and that's the best Jan and I have. We would answer more if we could. It's not that we don't want to. It's just we do not know. So that's the like as we kind of wait for our direction as well from the ministry of where we're going to go. You mentioned about the collective agreement. Again, that ran late this year. You know, July, how much time do you really have before everything actually gets settled? And then it comes in through the billing department, our finance team, they're working overtime trying to get this done. You know, we do look after the province, but surprisingly enough, we're not a really big unit. So it's, you know, we try our best to make sure as we get the information, we get it out as fast as possible. So I hope that helps answer the question. And you know, as soon as we get more, we're going to be doing an announcement too. So
Thank you. That does help. I do have a related question. Under the Community Safety and Policing Act Regulation 392 for 23, which is a general regulation, came into effect April 1st, 2024. Section 19 of the regulation sets out mandatory equipment and resources for officers and particular teams. And Schedule 1 to that regulation sets out a myriad of mandatory minimum equipment, including a number of items. It's quite a lengthy menu, and I'm trying to determine whether the 2025 estimates that have been provided have acknowledged that there may be equipment in Schedule 1 that the Prince Edward County O.P.P. detachment mandatorily must have as of April 1st, 2025.
thanks again for that question. A lot of these things that you're mentioning fall on, remember when we were looking at the side, the provincial obligation. So
Yes.
when you're looking at things like tactical officers, search and rescue, helicopters, all these kind of things, that's a provincial obligation. So that's not a cost recovery for the municipality. So I think I know where you're going with the question. Are you going to be looking at a cost increase for that? So based on the billing model, the cost recovery is based on your base and your calls for service. So if there's a specific need for specific equipment from a tactical team, that's a provincial obligation. So that's going to fall on the provincial
So the
side.
Schedule 1 has no impact on municipal policing. The reason I ask is Hamilton Wentworth got a bit up in arms, their police services board, because of some things they spotted in the schedule, but there they would have the municipal and provincial functions together in one board. So I guess my question is there anything in Schedule 1 that's going to impact on the sergeant's detachment?
So you're referring to frontline equipment?
Yes.
Okay, frontline equipment. So to Rob's point, specialty teams equipment would be covered under provincial responsibilities. Additional equipment assigned to frontline officers would be rolled into the base service costs where we have equipment as a factor in there. That's based on a 4-year average as well. So if there's a change in equipment cost, it is calculated in the base service.
Well, then there may be, as of April 1st, 2025, equipment that the detachment must have on hand that they now don't. Is that correct?
Or they may have it currently. They may have it already.
It's another way of putting it, is there anything in the 2025 estimate provided to this municipality that takes account of Schedule 1?
I believe the 2025 numbers were updated to reflect current costs for equipment, which would include IT equipment, vehicles, uniforms, and ancillary equipment carried by officers. Those factors are updated. They're updated annually, and there is a 4-year average to eliminate or help manage spikes and valleys.
Spike, if there is to be one, will be in 2025.
Depending when the equipment is procured.
But by law, it has to be on hand as of April 1st, 2025.
So that would be reflected in the bill, yes, in the base services.
Yeah, just to add to that, you know, I hear what you're saying, and you're correct. If there is a frontline item that needs to be adjusted, that will increase the base service, which that increase is absorbed through all properties across Ontario. So previous year, the base services was less. It's more now. So As Janet was saying, and you were saying, it had to be in effect by April 1st. The 2025 estimate's already out. My assumption would be it's already included in that. What comes for 2026, if there's more equipment or more items, maybe that base service goes up, maybe it doesn't. So, but a direct cost, it would be seen in the base services, not a bill to Prince Edward County. It would just be a provincial increase of the base services for the cost of doing business. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Move along. Is there any other questions from board members? Seeing none, could I have someone move receipt of this presentation from both Janet and Rob? Bill, we have you, and we also have Robert. You read that out, Bill?
Thank you. That the presentation from Janet Feaver, Municipal Policing Specialist regarding the O.P.P. Policing Bureau be received.
Thank you. We have Robert second that. All in favor? Thank you for coming forward. Thank you. We have no comments from the audience, correct? Verbal updates from board members. Do we have any? Go ahead, Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the legislation that we currently operate, the new Community Safety and Policing Act, the board is required to hold 4 meetings per year, and our O.P.P. Detachment Board will have held 3 meetings, and the issue that I raised for consideration by verbal update is whether in fact we should have a 4th meeting in the calendar year 2024 to, quote, stay on side.
Through the chair to you, Casey, this is an agenda item down further, so we can do discussion on this one down further.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The issue of an annual report, for the first time, the Police Services Board here, now the O.P.P. Detachment Board, will have to produce an annual report on or before June 30th. And I take it that that would be a calendar year, and we would be covering the calendar year 2024 in the report that we provide to Council on June 30th, 2025. And it appears that we have a second report that we also have to provide according to the bylaw that created this board, which would indicate what our activities and intended direction and projects are. So there are really 2 reports, one required by statute with respect to the policing provided by the detachment to quote section 68(1)(f) of the statute, and a second report which would report on our activities, intended directions, or projects. And I don't know whether it's worth rolling them into one report or not.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Yes, so through the chair to you again, Casey. So the annual report requirement prescribed in bylaw 88-2024 should reference section 8(1)(f) of the CSBA instead of the section 41. So it is just one report satisfying both those requirements.
Except the statute requires an annual report, quotes, regarding the policing provided by the detachment. And the bylaw requires a report that reports on, quotes, its activities and its intended direction or projects. They're 2 different subject matters.
So my understanding is they're usually a joint report, at which point the chair of the board and the O.P.P. detachment commander do it together.
That would make perfect sense.
Thanks.
The issue of a strategic plan, municipal police service boards have to provide a strategic plan under the new act. We do not, because section 39 of the statute is not one of the sections incorporated by reference to our obligations. the detachment commander prepares essentially a strategic plan when you look at the new legislation and would consult with us on that. There is an existing strategic plan, and it was prepared by the last board, as I recall, and it had sort of targets or initiatives and reporting on progress, and there were to be quarterly updates. And I'm just thinking it might be worthwhile, rather than jettisoning it because it was a good project that cost the board money, that we should have updates for the third and fourth quarters of 2024 with respect to the progress on implementation of the 7 pillars or targets within that act or within that plan. So I raised that for consideration because I think it shouldn't be allowed to lapse. I had 3 further items. One was really arose out of the new statute, which canceled all existing agreements between police services. And at the Zone 2 meeting of the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards on September 19 and 20 in Pembroke.
Casey, it might be better for you too. Try one of these other mics next to you and see if it might be a clear frequency. I'm wondering if the folks online might be able to hear a bit better. But just turn off the other one and then try one of the other mics and see if it's clear.
It's a little clearer.
Yeah, but just might not be as staticky.
And the representative, Mr. White, who was at that meeting, was quite clear that the agreements, such as they may have existed, were over. And this led to a very robust discussion about officers from the Prince Edward County Detachment being involved in a joint forces operation with Kingston Municipal Force. And, you know, how is this going to work? There's no agreements. And we were ultimately told that it was being worked on kind of at a provincial level. And I think it's something that we're going to have to return to, because it looks like we will be required to have agreements existing with other police services other than those under the jurisdiction of this board. It appears that an officer from another jurisdiction, if acting under the supervision of an officer in the Prince Edward County O.P.P. detachment, would not be an issue. But this whole issue of the cancellation of the pre-existing agreements under sections 13 and 14 of the new legislation is going to be an issue. I raised maybe 2 other briefer issues. One is the ride-alongs, which are tremendously important in terms of members of the board understanding the nature of the work of the officers in the detachment for which we're responsible. There are certain sort of issues that arise, and again, Mr. White, who's the Inspector General representative in Pembroke, in a general way raised the issue of ride-alongs, said they're an excellent thing, but you really have to sort of think about them or give them some consideration. But he didn't go on to really indicate sort of what it is that was influencing his thinking in having raised the topic. And some issues are when you are standing beside an officer at a ride-along, as she or he is involved with a member of the public, you may well be perceived as a peace officer yourself, although we have an independent role. So that's one issue. A second issue is what authority we have as a board member on a ride-along or an accompaniment to enter onto private property or into private property. I actually had that experience, and it was only afterward that it came to mind, and I was not really able to reconcile in my own mind that I had any lawful authority to be on private property. The third issue is when you're on a ride-along and there is, say, a serious traffic incident where charges are laid or a criminal incident of some type, I think it's important to realize that the police and the Crown are required to give disclosure to defense counsel, which would involve identifying you. And I would assume that that would be by name, but not by address or phone number. But I don't know that, and Sean, you might be able to help us in due course on that. But I just think it is a part of a ride-along that you are a witness in certain circumstances, and the defense for a person charged has a right to know the witnesses to the transaction for which he or she has been charged. And the last issue is the issue of insurance. If, God forbid, there were an accident or an injury during a ride-along, is the board member covered by the insurance for board members, an issue that we've sort of talked about broadly before. And I think these are matters that might be worth thinking about and coming back to or having certain inquiries made. And the last verbal update issue is the issue of attendance at the Ontario Association of Police Service Board meetings. Obviously, not all board members would go to any particular meeting, and I'm just wondering if there should be a policy to ensure at least one of us is there, because the business part of the meeting, I think, is important. You pick up things that you might not otherwise get on their website. A complicating factor is where a motion comes up on the sudden that's not been circulated in advance of the meeting, and whether the 1 or 2 or 3 board members who are there have the authority of the board as a whole to vote in a particular way on a motion that arises, as one did actually in Pembroke. So I raise these as verbal updates, as matters that I would encourage my colleagues to think about, which may engender further discussion and may be worthy of placement as discrete items on a future agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. All very valid, important points. I know Councillor Roberts. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Casey. I agree with the chair, Councillor Brainey, all very important issues. And just reflecting on the ride-along question, I'm wondering if part of the, and again, you're right, Casey, it does, I think, require a special agenda item so that we really do understand the implications of the ride-along. But I'm wondering if what was motivating Graham White was more conceptual, in the sense that a clear separation between governance and operations, and to that extent, in past CEO and president and that kind of stuff roles, there has been a great deal of value to the equivalent of a ride-along, in the sense that the executive of a corporation would be, take the opportunity to actually go into operations facilities and really understand how things work, and that in turn provided for better and more informed governance. It was kind of that hands off but nose in sort of approach to senior management. But those matters, Casey, I think are very important in terms of liability and legal implications. But I would also hate to see the ride-along opportunity and that connection between governance in operations for better efficiency and effectiveness, I would hate to see that lost, but I do think we need to address it, and thank you for doing that.
Thanks, both Bill and Casey. I agree with you, Bill, what you're just saying. It would be unfortunate to see that opportunity negated through some over-governance on that part. But can I assume that Sean and the clerk will investigate some of these points and report back at a future date?
Absolutely, Chair. I'll have a conversation with Staff Sergeant Hatch, and this is something that we can put up to our Risk Management Bureau at General Headquarters and let them have a look at it, and we'll report back to you, sir.
Terrific, thank you. Any other questions or updates from board members? Seeing none, though, we'll move on to items for consideration.
Sorry,
yes,
through the
go ahead.
Chair.
Yeah.
Can we just get a motion to receive the verbal updates from board members, please?
Sure. Could we have someone move the verbal update from board members? Bill? And how's Sarah? Do you want to second that? Perfect. All in favor? Perfect. We'll then move on to 9.1. So we have Hillary Fennell, our Community Initiatives Coordinator, and Julianne Schneps, Program Supervisor, provide an update on the implementation of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Welcome. You want to come up too, Hillary? You're fine if you want to. There's a spot. You good? Okay.
Good morning, and through the chair to members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak about the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. I'm Julianne Schneps. I'm the program supervisor. I work for the municipality in the Community Services, Programs, and Initiatives Department. And Hillary Fennell, my colleague, is here as well. She's the Community Initiatives Coordinator within the same department. And Hillary, if there are questions or things I need your help with, I will certainly ask you to come to the microphone. But we are the primary staff supports to the CSWB. I've been working on the project for most of the last couple of years. Hillary's relatively new in her role. She's been with the municipality just under a couple of months. But you're going to start seeing Hillary speaking more and leading more within the CSWB and a little bit less of me. So this might be my swan song on this project. And then Hillary will take over as your main contact. Today I wanted to present a little bit about Prince Edward County's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. At the last meeting, you heard a little bit about the legislative context for CSWB planning, but this presentation is really focused on what we're doing here in our local community. I'm just going to see if I can move forward in the presentation. There we go. So we'll be talking about what we do, how we do this at the local level here, what's been achieved so far, what we're focusing on, and what some of the next steps are moving forward in CSWB planning. So just as a reminder, every municipality is required to have a CSWB. The Community Safety and Policing Act outlines the process for developing a plan, and municipalities have some discretion in how that planning is done at the local level. Some municipalities do it in collaboration with other municipalities at a regional level. Some farm out or shop out the administrative work around the CSWB to third parties like a United Way, for example. But in Prince Edward County, we're doing our CSWB planning within our own geographic boundaries for the municipality of Prince Edward County. And as part of the act, there's a requirement for an advisory committee to CSWB planning. And in Prince Edward County, the oversight for that advisory committee is here with the O.P.P. Detachment Board. That's a pretty unique arrangement. It doesn't happen like that in most other municipalities, but it's been serving our CSWB planning really well. There's been a lot of enthusiasm and support for CSWB planning through the Police Services Board in the past and with our local O.P.P. detachment. And it's created a nice alignment between what you're doing here at the board and what this plan is doing. So the O.P.P. Detachment Board is the first to receive reports from the advisory committee. And I'll just stop here. In our governance language, it's called a working group. It's our CSWB working group. So I'm going to refer to it as a working group moving forward in the presentation. But the O.P.P. Detachment Board is the first to receive reports from the working group. And before things go to council for their final approval. And later in the agenda, we'll be talking about appointing a member from this new O.P.P. Detachment Board to the working group. So what's the municipality's role? Here locally, we've actually been working on a transition over the last couple of years from more of a volunteer-led coordination of the plan to something that sits more firmly within the municipal staffing structure that's a staff-led coordination of the plan. The past Police Services Board chair was a huge advocate for CSWB planning and took a really hands-on approach to working on the plan. It was pretty much a full-time job for him in leadership of that plan. With the transition to the new O.P.P. Detachment Board, transition among a lot of the players in the community, and some staffing realignment, we're able now to transition that administrative and coordinating leadership from the volunteers or the members of the board to municipal staff. And that'll help ensure continuity and capacity for planning, regardless of the individuals who are on the board and what their other commitments might be. So the O.P.P. Detachment Board still has oversight, council still has final approval, but staff will be showing more of a leadership role, working closely with community partners to bring our CSWB to life. So speaking of community partners, the CSWB is a shared responsibility among the municipality, the police board, and community partners. So we work in a collective impact model, and we have dozens of community partners who contribute to the outcomes of the plan. And these community partners have organized themselves in action teams around the key themes of our CSWB plan. They report to and receive guidance from the working group, and municipal staff provide coordinating and facilitating support for these action teams. Municipal staff also sit on the action teams as participating and contributing members. So if there is a role for the municipality to play in bringing some of these objectives and goals to life, then the municipal staff who support the plan are there to help bring the municipality into action as well. So the current priority areas, the focus areas of the CSWB that we're currently implementing, so this is the time period from 2022 to 2026, are listed on the slide that you have in front of you. It is poverty reduction, housing and homelessness, seniors support, mental health and problematic substance use, and domestic violence, sexual violence, and intimate partner violence. So how were these priority areas identified? Throughout 2021 and 22, the CSWB working group worked with a hired facilitator, Lori Prest, to go through a plan revision process. So they looked at the previous risk areas, they looked at data, they leveraged the wisdom of the community partners who are around the table, and used that process to confirm the 5 priority areas for our local plan. The previous plan had a focus on emergency response. That was not brought forward into the current plan, but instead housing was introduced as a priority area, as well as domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual violence. So those are the 5 priority areas of the plan, and we have 5 action teams working in those areas. So in the slide deck that you have, that's also in the agenda published online, there's a summary of a number of CSWB-related activities that have been accomplished in this plan's implementation. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of them in detail, but if you have questions about any of them specifically, please do ask at the end of the presentation. I'll note that some of the outcomes that we list on the slides here are things that were done at the action team table. So for example, the red card, which you see in front of you, this was initiated and designed, developed, funded, and implemented through the action team. But there's some other things on here, for example, the hoarding action response team. This is an outcome that didn't start at the action team table, but it's mentioned in the CSWB plan as a priority. And I just wanted to shine a light on this project. There was a training day yesterday. I believe there were 80 people who were present at this training day who were learning about the complex issue of hoarding and how it intersects with the risk areas of housing and mental health and public safety. And this action team is sort of aligned, adjacent with the CSWB, but it's a really great example of how collaborative planning and collaborative response can have a big impact in the community. So this is a really great example of a CSWB-like project that has its own life outside of the plan, but is aligned with and is mentioned as a priority in the plan. So I just want to congratulate that team on that really excellent event yesterday. So as you can see in the slide, it's a wide variety of things that have been accomplished so far within the plan. Some of these are very time limited and smaller projects. Some of them were grant funded. And others have a really long planning horizon. For example, the poverty reduction strategy for Prince Edward County. We're in early stages of building our capacity to come up with a poverty reduction strategy for Prince Edward County. And that'll have a very long planning and impact horizon that will probably last a decade or more because it is such a big hill to climb that requires a lot of community collaboration. So just focusing on moving forward, we're about halfway through the implementation of this plan, and all of the action teams did a mid-plan check-in process. They checked in with their purpose, their goals, their desired outcomes, and were asked to be very quite clear about what their focus is in 2025 and 26, moving towards the second half of the plan. And I won't go through all of it in detail, but I'll tell you about a couple of themes that emerged. The teams were really focused on building capacity for collaboration. So after the pandemic, there was a lot of disruption in terms of our community partners and the people who were sitting around the table, the needs of the community, decreased funding, increased needs, changing needs. And a lot of what we've been doing is working on our ability, our capacity to collaborate together after all that disruption. So this shows up as things like knowledge sharing events where organizations are sharing what it is that they're working on, what they're doing. We're learning about other collective impact kind of projects in the community, something like the Ontario Health Team, for example, which is a very large collective impact project that will intersect with our mental health work. And really bringing everybody up to the same level of knowledge about what's happening in the community. So we're also trying to make sure that the right people are at the table for collaboration. We're building these relationships, and we're focusing on conversations like no wrong door planning. So making sure that all the agencies around the table have a good enough understanding of what everybody's doing, what the resources and services are that are available, so that if a client comes to an agency, they've not knocked on the wrong door. There's somebody there who knows what's happening in the community and can make a warm handoff to help that person get the services that they need. So that kind of capacity building, relationship building has been a big focus and will continue to be a focus as we move through the next couple of years. And then another theme that has emerged has been about communication and awareness. The risk areas that are identified in Community Safety Wellbeing Plan are really about upstream intervention. So they're things that the community as a whole can take responsibility for building resilience and building strength in the community at up the stream, so that down the stream there are fewer people who need to interact with police and other emergency services. And so there's a need within the broader community to raise awareness about the risk areas that are identified in the plan and invite the community into solution building. So most of the action teams want to take community awareness campaigns in 2025. That's about raising awareness, but also reducing stigma around things like poverty or mental health or substance use. And they're also interested in communications tactics that will help people access the services that we have in the community. We know there's a gap between what is available and what the community knows to be available. And so we're working on different campaigns to help those who need services connect with those services and share what's actually available in our community. So in the interest of time, again, I'm not going to stop on every single action team and talk about how that will show up in their work over the next couple years, but happy to answer questions if they come up. So I'm just going to slide through each of these and move to the conversation around next steps. So later in the agenda today, you will be asked to appoint a member of the O.P.P. Detachment Board to join the CSWB working group, which is the legislative advisory group to our CSWB plan. That working group, we anticipate, will take more of a leadership role in 2025. So now that we've got some of those administrative building blocks sorted out with a full-time staff member who is assigned to this project, with the sort of the reorganization of the detachment board under the new legislation, we've got all these big pieces in place, and we're really looking at 2025 as an opportunity for that working group to take a leadership role here, and help staff sorry, I've lost my page here. Okay. And help staff to focus on the process for the next plan. It'll probably take about 18 months, maybe 24 months to get through the process of planning, ensuring there's a lot of community engagement and make sure that we have the risk areas right, make sure the right people are around the table, and make sure that we're developing a plan that's really implementable, really measurable, and will have the kind of impact on these complex issues that we have the capacity to achieve. So I think it's a very exciting time to join the working group, because it'll have that focus on building out that next plan and really getting, if the plan that we're working on right now is really about building capacity to collaborate and communicating and raising awareness of these issues and tackling some things on a tactical level, I think that the next plan will really have more of that system level focus and a really good focus on measurable impacts and measurable activities. So it's an exciting time to join that, if that's a bit of a sales pitch to you. So implementation of the plan will continue. The current plan parallel to that planning process over the next year and a half or so. And I think that's all the content that I wanted to share today. So welcome any questions that the board members may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any? Bill, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Julianne. That was a very good report. And my question is both particular to the staffing and approach we have now with regard to the community safety and well-being plan, but it's also a sort of broader conceptual concern for, I think, Shire Hall as a whole. And it really deals with the size of government and the public perception of that size being a difficult fit for the economic reality that most taxpayers are feeling at the moment. So it's not picking on our approach to the community safety and well-being plan or the excellent presentation and work that's been done by staff. But I think we need to recognize that there is something out there now that needs to be addressed, especially by those of us that are creating budgets and implementing budgets. So in the particular, it is that when our community strategy and well-being plan initiated, it was driven by the O.P.P, and it was driven by volunteer groups, service groups, community partners, and individuals. And I think there is, people think differently, but I think there is a burgeoning concern in the public that all levels of government, federal, provincial, municipal, that there's a burgeoning cost of government, rising taxes, too much tax-based support in administration. It's out of step with citizens' perception of value for their tax dollars. And that's a challenge, for those of us that want to see the good work of things like our community safety and well-being plan perfected and implemented and improved upon, which is what our staff is trying to do with those partners. But the reality is we're going to be hearing more and more about that in future budget cycles and future elections. So I'm just wondering if in this case, there's maybe some thought given, down the road a little bit, or take back to staff deliberations or part of a staff police services board conversation about how do we assure our municipal taxpayers that this particular approach to the community safety and well-being plan is the most effective and the most efficient. And especially in the context that when it was initiated and when it was lauded as the first in Ontario, and the gold standard indeed in Ontario, it was not done in-house by municipal staff. It was done essentially by volunteers. So maybe some reflection on that, or if you have some initial thoughts on that, but it is a reality that we will be facing both politically and socially for the next decade or so.
Through the chair to Councillor Roberts, I don't have much by way of a response other than to offer that the CSWB is a program that was mandated by the province, and municipalities are tackling it in different ways, and I appreciate the perspective on how it was initiated in this community and how effective it was with the volunteer governance. In many comparable municipalities, there are staff who are assigned to it. It is a full-time role in a lot of jurisdictions because collective impact is a really complicated beast. It does take a full-time commitment to maintaining the space for that kind of community collaboration to happen. And we've had the benefit of volunteer leadership to hold that space for collaboration. And so staff are through this model, the ones who are going to be holding that space moving forward, unless directed otherwise. And community safety and well-being planning, it can have very positive impacts and value for taxpayer investment, including, the model is intended to reduce calls for service to the police and will reduce the billing that would come through the O.P.P in the future if it's working well. But there's other ways that those impacts can be seen in the community in terms of taxpayer investment. And just anecdotally, we've been working with a group of seniors on a project that was funded through the federal government to bring them into the CSWB and have them review the current plan and make comment on it. It's a very diverse group of seniors and highly engaged. And one of the bits of feedback that they gave when they were hearing about the risk areas in the plan was, if we know all of this is happening in our community, why aren't we doing anything about it? And through the CSWB and through elevating the profile of the CSWB and the kind of work we're doing, we can show that the municipality is doing something about those issues that are really real for a lot of people in the community. So I really do appreciate that perspective and appreciate the call for reflection on how we're going about doing it, and just offer that we do see a lot of value in the program.
Well, I completely agree with you. If I may be allowed a supplementary?
Absolutely, Bill, go ahead.
No, Julianne, I'm not taking issue with the huge importance of the community safety and well-being plan and the great work that's being done by staff. I want to be clear, I'm not taking issue with that. What I'm saying is that there is a broad, popular perspective that is not shrinking but growing, that I'm not going to repeat myself, but I think what you just said is part of a really good response to that sensibility that there's government overreach, government overload, etc. But we need to not put our head in the sand that is not a real phenomena out there at the municipal level, as well as the provincial and federal level. So, Julianne, I think what you said was great. I think it's got all the essential ingredients of the response regarding effectiveness and efficiency. But I think it has to be made, and we have to realize we can't put our head in the sand, that is out there and it is not going away. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions, comments from committee members? Seeing none, can I get you to move that receipt of this report, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good report.
Perfect. Could you, and could we have a seconder? Casey, could you read it out there, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Bill and Casey motion that the update from Hillary Fennell, Community Initiatives Coordinator, and Julianne Sneps, Program Supervisor on the implementation of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, be received.
Perfect. All in favor? Good, that carries. Well, then on to 9.2, could I have someone put that on the floor? So the amendments to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group Terms of Reference. Just have, we'll get Sarah to put it on the floor, and then Robert, you can second that.
And I will read that the board received that the O.P.P. Detachment Board approved the amendments to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group Terms of Reference as presented, and that the amendments to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group Terms of Reference as presented be forwarded to Council for consideration.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions or comments from board members? Take a vote. So we've got Sarah, you moved, and I think Robert, we had seconded. All in favor? Perfect. That carries. Then on to 9.3, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group membership. Could somebody put that on the floor? Go ahead, Bill, and then Robert will have him second that.
Thank you. It's a Bill and Robert motion that the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group membership be received, and that the O.P.P. Detachment Board recommend Council appoint blank to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Working Group as a representative of the O.P.P. Detachment Board.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, how would you like to proceed with that? Do we?
Just if there are any board members that are interested in being appointed, they can raise their hand, or are there any?
Do we have any members that are willing to serve on that working group?
Can I just make a comment, please?
Yes.
In 11 months' time from now, I plan to retire. And at that point in time, I would jump at this both feet in. But at this point in time, I can't. I would love to, but I've got another 11 months to work.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Could staff maybe give us a little bit of a tour of what's involved in terms of time and commitment?
I think that's a good suggestion, Bill.
Through the chair to the councillor, yeah, great question. I can't remember what the terms of reference say in terms of meeting frequency, so I may ask the clerk for some assistance with what is formally listed in the terms of reference. But this group would generally meet once a quarter. They tended to be 2-hour-long meetings during work days, and the staff and the action teams do a lot of the advance work to prepare the agenda and reporting from the action teams to the advisory board. So there'd be receiving of reporting at the meetings, and then there would be work that would be done on different phases of the planning process. So probably would be a presentation about an approach to community consultation for the next plan development, and we would receive advice from the working group about how to go forward with that, if we're on the right track, that kind of stuff. Not a lot of work between agendas unless there are tasks that folks wanted to volunteer to help with. But yeah, usually once a quarter for a couple hours.
Well, I think our community safety and well-being plan is essential to our community, so I would step forward to do that if no one else is so inclined.
Thank you, Bill. Madam Clerk, did you have something you were waving your hand to add?
Thank you, through the chair. Just confirming Julianne's comment that the meetings, as per the terms of reference, shall be at a minimum quarterly.
I'm hoping for at a maximum quarterly.
But it could be once a week for 2 hours, or Councillor Roberts. No, they're shaking.
There'll be a lot of Zoom calls. But once a quarter is fine, and I underline the importance of this plan for Prince Edward County. It means a lot, and so I'm happy to help out.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Go ahead, Casey.
Roberts, be the O.P.P. representative on community seat.
I can't hear Casey.
Sorry, can you, turn the mic on?
There we go.
I've moved you.
Oh, okay. Am I in the Cayman Islands yet?
I move that Councillor Roberts be the O.P.P. Detachment Board's representative on the community safety and well-being group.
Thanks.
Second by Robert. All in favor? That carries. Nine point four, the review of the operational budget. Could we have someone put that on the floor to discuss? Casey, could you just put that on the floor and we'll have...
I would move that the O.P.P. Detachment Board 2024 operating budget statement as certain.
And a seconder for that? Sarah? Any questions or comments from members? Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through the chair, Councillor Roberts, at the last meeting, you asked a question about this, so I just wanted to provide clarity. This is the 2024 budget as approved by council and just a snapshot of the expenses and revenues incurred to date.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So it's moved by Casey, seconded by Sarah. No further comments or questions. All in favor? And that carries. 9.5, we have Aaron Miller, Detective Constable, provide a verbal update on the roles and responsibilities detachment abuse issues investigator. So welcome, Aaron. Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you. I think Councillor Roberts will have the best ride-along experience in board history, but I'll leave that to
Actually, I think I did with Sergeant Guscott, but maybe last year we had a pretty good one too.
the debate begins. Thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Miller. I'm a detective constable. I am the Detachment Abuse Issues Investigator. We call it the DAY because it is quite the title. So a few of the things that Julianne had mentioned, I'll also be speaking about. It's my understanding that these positions are net new to the province. There are 70 of us across the province. And it's as a result of global issues provincially, but it solves a few problems locally as well. So the province, Julianne had mentioned, the seniors had stated that we know there's a problem, what are we doing about this? So luckily, I'm happy to report that the province, I am a result of the province's response to one of these questions. As a result of any inquest that we read about, one of the recommendations is to have a domestic violence coordinator. That's the old title. It's my understanding that the O.P.P. used to have these positions and they were phased out for a number of reasons. The O.P.P. has implemented, like I said, 70 of me across the province, so most attachments have one, including Highway Safety Division, and we have a number of job functions, although I'm going to focus on 3 priority areas. One being building community partnerships, reviewing domestic occurrences, reviewing the intimate partner violence occurrences, and then thirdly, timely review of all abuse issues strictly at our detachments. I should add that my position is clustered with Lennox and Addington. So Lennox and Addington covers for us and we cover for Lennox and Addington when we're off or on leave or training or things like that. The first, like Julianne had mentioned, the previous community safety well-being plan had mentioned they wanted to bring back the domestic violence coordinator. That was one of the first recommendations from the report. But as we know, we're a provincial beast. So luckily this checks that box. So that was a direct recommendation both provincially and locally. One of the other positive impacts from the community safety well-being plan that you heard Julianne speak to was the implementation of intimate partner violence being its own pillar. That wasn't the case in the previous plan. So we're excited to see that in the updated plan. As I'm sure everybody's aware, the municipality has declared IPV an epidemic, as have many municipalities, and again, a result of a number of inquests and inquiries. So what does my job look like? As I mentioned, those are the three priority areas. The big one is the community relations, build and maintain those community relationships. Like Julianne mentioned, it is a collaborative approach, and Councillor Roberts spoke to this as well. We're never going to police our way out of intimate partner violence. We realize it's a problem. What are we going to do about this? We have to engage our community partners, and we're very lucky to be in Prince Edward County. We all know the other agencies. We work very closely with the municipality, folks like Alternatives for Women, Victim Services, VIII, things like that. However, what we're seeing is the handoff or the referral process from us at a call for service to that agency takes some work, and it takes a community effort. It's one thing for an officer to go to a call, say, hey, do you want a referral? Do you want victim services, et cetera? But it's our job to actually follow up with that and make sure that that happens. And that's one of my job functions, is following up with a victim after the original call, after things have calmed down a little bit, they've had time to realize or think about what they actually need, and then we can have a discussion when things are a little bit less heated. As I said, we're building and maintaining those community relationships. So one of the big things is working with the schools. As we know, the youth sexual assault numbers locally have been increasing, and again, we realize this is a problem, so what are we doing about this? Thanks to the support of the O.P.P Detachment Board, we partnered with St. Leonard's to get some funding recently, and that's again going to be one of my job functions, is to co-present with them to the schools to talk specifically to those legal pieces. They can talk about the healthy relationships and the things that they are the experts at, and then we can come in and speak specifically to the supports, the services we have, and then the laws around consent, things like that. Like I said, one of the other priorities is the oversight on intimate partner violence. So what does that look like? That's everything from a broad, is it properly categorized, which I will admit, I'm learning more about the importance of this from a stats gathering as well as a billing process, and seeing how the big blue machine ties into and affects us locally as taxpayers. So part of it is making sure, are these domestic occurrences actually categorized properly? And are we getting credit for the great work that we're doing? Right down to victim safety, victim supports. Has the investigator done everything to make sure that that victim is getting the best, that victim has the best opportunity to stay safe as a result of the officer's investigation? So when we look at investigative excellence, which is something that we always talk about, has everything been covered off? Everything down to, the checklists have been checked off, to follow up with the victims, and everything in between. Have all of those things been done? I mentioned the third area, the third priority area, is timely review or timely oversight of all things abuse issues. So intimate partner violence being the thing that keeps me the busiest, but because of our demographic, seniors abuse is also on that, also on the list. Child abuse, human trafficking, seniors abuse fall under my portfolio now as well. But of course, when we think of seniors abuse, back to what Julianne spoke of earlier, we look at our experts in the field and our community partners. So we engage folks like Community Care for Seniors, who have told me when we look at seniors abuse, we all know a lot of these crimes go unreported, And when we look at seniors specifically, it's oftentimes that the reliance on the caregiver is so strong that they're unable to report, because if they report, then that's going to significantly interrupt their quality of life or how they live. So things like that fall under my portfolio now, and we have to figure out how we move forward and how we encourage those folks to report, and how that we ensure that we look after the victims and that folks stay safe. So as you can see, the primary focus is all things intimate partner violence, overseeing those occurrences to make sure that they're investigated to the quality that folks would expect of us, and to make sure that the victims are safe, build and maintain the community relationships that we are very lucky here in Prince Edward to have built. Thanks to the staff that we have, he is a huge supporter of that. And then timely review of all things abuse issues. So that's the Coles notes of the Detachment Abuse Issues Investigators. There's a lot to the job, and I'm excited to be in the position. I think we have a lot of work to do, but we've already seen some successes. One of the stories that I wanted to share, without particulars of course, we had an individual, wasn't ready to report quite yet. Individual spoke with an officer, wasn't ready. The referral came to my desk. Is there anything that we can do? Individual and I had a discussion. I contact a local agency that I won't disclose because that would give away a little too much. They spoke with the client for 35 minutes, and they must have had a great private discussion. And then I came back in the room. Individual said, yep, I want to give a statement, provided a very good statement, and that led to domestic related charges, and we were able to ensure victim safety through a number of other referrals as well. So we're already seeing direct successes locally, and we're hearing similar stories across the province from our DAII calls. So again, there's lots of opportunity, and I'm excited that the province decided to bring back these positions. Any questions on all of that?
Go ahead, Casey.
Thank you very much, Aaron. What are your resources for keeping up to date with respect to the law on, say, consent in sexual assault cases? It's an area that's the courts are all over every week at all levels, and nuancing it here and there.
It's a good question, and we're lucky enough that the senior officers at our detachments are linked in to distribution lists from court case decisions. So they'll often send it out to us. But we have what's called the Strategic Communications Portal. So they have key messages from anything right now, Festive Ride, for example. We can log in there to see messaging about Festive Ride, but they'll also talk to things about law around consent. But ultimately, it's the code is, of course, our number one go-to. But as you say, the nuances can be a little bit tricky. But we're lucky we have a unit for everything. So whether that's, I've talked to the local Crown about questions that I don't understand, but I like to go to the experts. So I'm not sure if that specifically answers your question, but whether it's our child sexual exploitation unit, we're lucky enough to have a local contact who she's in the office quite a bit. And I always like to get her cornered and ask her questions about these nuances, because you're absolutely right. It changes quite often, and I don't want to go into a school and provide the wrong information.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron, thank you once again for another wonderful presentation. My impression is that there is an increasing rate of reports and incidents of abuse and intimate partner violence. But I just want to fact check that with you in the sense that are we seeing more reported incidents because people are thankfully more aware of the resources and helplines, et cetera, and therefore making use of them? Or is that happening as well as an increasing rate of abuse and intimate partner violence?
It's a great question, and about a week ago, I would have said yes to part A of that, in that we're reducing the stigma, more people are reporting. However, I just had a discussion with one of our excellent community resources, the folks at Alternatives for Women, and they pointed out to me that the research that suggests the number of unreported assaults is not going up, it's staying the same. So you can't have one go up and one stay the same. So to answer your question, we don't know. I don't think we'll ever know. It's hard to get that unreported number. But my fear is that we've been looking at it a little bit incorrectly. We've been assuming, same with sexual assaults, if that number goes up, we're doing a really good job at promoting those supports and services. But is it a fact that it's simply happening more in our community than we like to think it is?
Yeah. May I ask a perhaps related question?
Go ahead, Bill.
Aaron, do you see a connection between the rate of abuse and intimate partner violence and the issue of human trafficking? And if there is, would it be helpful, for example, regarding STAs and reported incidents of human trafficking involving local STAs, would it be helpful to have a municipal bylaw requiring some kind of signage in STAs with, that indicated the available help numbers and contacts that would be available to those victims of human trafficking? And I guess related, you tell me, Aaron, would it be helpful at some point to have a presentation at this board by the O.P.P. Human Trafficking Unit? So those are two questions.
Yeah,
I think they're related.
3 questions. I'll start with the middle one because that's the easiest one. Yes, if you've been in an en route recently, or a lot of bars, hotels in the city, you'll see that advertising, and it's supports and services, because the 401 corridor, I'm not the human trafficking expert, but of course the 401 corridor is the easiest way to shuttle goods, whatever they are, across the province. And I believe that's largely led by the RCMP. The RCMP has a huge campaign on. So to answer your question, yes, anything that we can encourage a victim to be able to access those supports and services, we are all for. To your second question, I'm always blown away at, to your third question, I'm always blown away at the prevalence of human trafficking. We're sadly naive to think that it doesn't happen in Prince Edward County, especially with the number of STAs, anywhere there's accommodations, proximity to 401. So I always encourage anybody that has an interest to hear the experts in human trafficking, because they always have incredible stories. So yes to that. Going back to question number 1, that would be a question for the human trafficking experts. They can explain how the grooming process works, how people are originally chosen, things like that. So put that in the parking lot for now and bring that back when the experts come.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to put in the parking lot. I know at our last Eastern meeting with the O.P.P, Councillor Roberts, Casey, myself attended, and this was a topic. So I think the 3 of us would certainly be interested in getting some information at some point in time on that. So thanks for bringing that up, Bill, so we can try to move forward with that. Any other questions, comments from members right now? No, seeing none, could I have somebody move the receipt of Aaron's report? Casey, can you just read that out then? And we'll get a seconder.
I move that the board receive the verbal report on the roles and responsibilities of the Detachment Abuse Issues Investigator as presented by Constable Miller this morning.
And Councillor Roberts has seconded that. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We have a verbal report from the detachment commander related to complaints in Section 89, secondary activities, the Ontario Community Safety and Policing Act. Go ahead, Sean.
To the board through the chair, you'll have a look at the Detachment Board report that Staff Sergeant Hatch has crafted. You'll see in there for public complaints, there's numeral 2. They are not complaints from the public, so I can say that there's no complaints from the public. Those 2 complaints are associated to SIU investigations resulting from in-custody injury. Staff Sergeant Hatch told me to pass on to the board that there's no concerns that he has. We're just waiting for the SIU to do their work and are unable to comment any further. And the detachment commander has not received any requests for secondary employment as well.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, could we have somebody move that verbal report? Bill, go ahead. And somebody second that? Casey? So Casey seconded, Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That the Detachment Commander's report to the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board be received.
Thank you. All in favor? That carries. We'll then move on to 9.7, the report of the detachment commander.
Good morning, Chair, to the rest of the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning. And Staff Sergeant Hatch unfortunately wasn't able to attend today, so he's asked me to attend in his absence, and I appreciate that. He's prepared the report, which everyone's had access to. I'm not going to go through everything line by line, but I've had a discussion with the detachment commander. There's a few things that he wanted me to bring to your attention specifically through the report. If there is anything additionally that I didn't cover, I'm certainly willing to accept any questions in regards to his report. So just getting right into it, the first issue, the collision reporting system, motor vehicle collision by type. If you see in the year to date in 2024, it's still showing up as 1 fatal motor vehicle collision. That was the accident that occurred right out here at Schreier Hall. That person had a medical event prior to the collision, and unfortunately it's just something that shows up in the report because it's a conflict between a records management system and the provincial motor vehicle collision accident reporting system that it shows up that it was a fatal. So there's still there still has not been any fatal collisions in Prince Edward County. The other issue that he wanted me to cover off is under the Highway Traffic Act. Some of the numbers, you'll see that that some of the numbers are down. A lot of that for this month, for September, it just has to do with the fact that we still don't have the mobile moving radar equipment in the vehicle. I can tell you that the manufacturer of the radar equipment, they know what the problem is. It was interfering with the police radios in the vehicle, the radios that the officers use to communicate with the communication center back and forth, that it was interfering with their equipment. And so the manufacturer's been contacted. They know what the problem is. They know it actually was interfering with the police radio equipment and the emergency button. So they've come up with a solution, and they're just proving that solution is going to work. And hopefully the manufacturer can get that solution tested and confirmed that it's not going to interfere with our radios anymore, and then they can get those mobile radar equipment back in our cars, and we'll get back to doing some more traffic enforcement. I mean, we still do have some handheld radars that aren't part of that interference issue, but so that's why those numbers are down. And then and just further down the list for traffic-related charges under other, you'll see it's 400. A lot of those there was a lot of marine charges this year. The O.P.P. Marine unit was out did a lot of patrol hours during this summer season, and they were out there doing a lot of enforcement, and they issued a lot of tickets. And impaired driving, so far year to date we're at 89. It's still a prevalent problem in our community. It's not just something that's unique to Prince Edward County. It's nationwide. And today is festive ride kickoff, starts today. So from today all the way up until January 1st, New Year's Day, obviously the O.P.P, they're partnered with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So you will see enhanced ride programs will be set up, whether it's the officers that are on duty when they have time, where they're not busy with calls for service, they're going to be encouraged to set up ride programs. And also there'll be paid duty officers out conducting specific, just coming in for that, just to do ride programs throughout Prince Edward County. And again, you'll see under the E tickets, they're also down as well for the month of September. They're down 31.9%, and they're down overall by the year. And that again, that's just coupled with that. The radars not being in the cruisers, it's lessening the opportunities for the officers to identify traffic violations. I mean, speeding is the easiest one. You know, when they're running radar, they see a car that's speeding, they can pull them over, and then they can take the enforcement as they seem fit. So not being able to do as many traffic stops, hence it's just impacting the warnings as well. The other issue that he wanted me to bring up to the board's attention is under property crime, break and enters. They still continue to be quite low. You'll see they're 4, like, so year to date they're at 16. Historically, 4 to 5 years ago, these were up close to 80 to 100. I don't know if that's just a carryover from COVID, and obviously break and enters plummeted during COVID, during the lockdown time frame. Maybe one could argue that certain folks that are keen to break the law and steal from people are finding other crimes to commit, unfortunately. But the break and enters still continue to be quite low. And the one other point I've already spoke about, the public complaints report. In the report it said 2, and I spoke earlier about that those are 2 are SIU investigations. And one other point, under the mental health occurrences, they still continue to gradually rise. I mean, not something significant. Year to date, so in 2023, at this time frame, we were at 113. We're at 137 for this year. 2022 was 115. So, and I just attribute that the mental health calls it just still continues to show the stress that people are under, just given the current socioeconomic circumstances that people in our community are faced with. The one thing that I will say that is fantastic is our integrated mobile police corps response team, the impact workers that we have from the Canadian Association of Mental Health, Hastings, Prince Edward. They're there, they're at the office. We have two full-time workers. They're with the officers at the detachment 7 days a week, 365, and we're able to make those referrals immediately and have them attend and give some supports to these folks, whether it's I mean, just speaking to my platoon, last block of shifts that I worked, we ended up having two referrals where people had called in that don't reside in the county, but had a friend or a family member that was residing here. They wanted the police to go and do a welfare check on them. And, officers attended, did the welfare check, immediately recognized that the impact worker needed to be engaged. One was an elderly couple, in seniors, bedridden, house with some hoarding issues, and that's been the impact worker engaged right away and has got a lot of resources in place to deal with those folks, and the other person was just someone who called in and was under a lot of stress and was threatening self-harm. Officers were able to attend, verify that the person wasn't wanting to fulfill any of those feelings, and instead of going to the hospital and going to the emergency department, we were able to get that impact worker right there at the scene and provide them some supports and some follow-up down the road. Second point that's very coupled with mental health, so overdose occurrences. Although we like to say that we're immune from some of the things that we see just north of Prince Edward County, specifically in Belleville, where they've had a number of challenges with overdoses. We have not had any overdoses, whether fatal or non-fatal, here in Prince Edward County. The last one that we had was in 2022, but it doesn't mean that, there's not the potential for that, but we just have to be careful. And the last point that Staff Sergeant Hatch wanted me to speak about is just referrals to victim services. The officers are still continuing. I would argue the only numbers that are in this report are the last 3 years. I'd say probably maybe 5, 6 years ago, our numbers wouldn't have been this high, but it just certainly shows, the numbers show that consistently the officers are making those referrals to victim services. And you've heard Detective Miller talk about earlier about how another agency was able to help somebody come forward and make a complaint and follow through with an investigation with police. So it's a lot of times we're still making the victim referrals, just even when there isn't a charge laid or any enforcement taken, the officers are still doing that. We try to get them. We're not getting the acceptance rate as much as we'd like to see, because you'll see it's only around the 20% range, but it is slowly getting better. You'll see it was 17% accepted in 2022, then it's up to 21% in 2023. It's 23%. So it's just the old adage: just keep moving that, just keeping that further down the road, and hopefully it'll get better. And just to follow up, I'll certainly I'll reach out to the human trafficking unit. We have an officer that was at Prince Edward County that is in that unit now, so we have a good connection there. We can have somebody from the human trafficking unit come here and present to the board, and I will follow up in regards to the ride along, those specific questions with our risk management folks. And if there's any questions at all, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Sean, for bringing forward that report of the detachment commander. Any questions, comments from board members? Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Sean. That was a really good report, and thank you to you and the commander and the whole detachment for your service. It's really, really deeply appreciated. Two quick things. One is if our detachment thinks it would be a good idea to have that mandatory notice in STAs with regarding human trafficking and resources here in the county, perhaps that could be coordinated with the clerk to become back as an agenda item for us to recommend to council. I have a kind of we talked a lot about billing and the sharing of billing, Sean, earlier in this meeting. And our O.P.P detachment does a lot of community service. I'm thinking, for example, of that iPad that was found on Redner's Knittville Road. And that's really special, I think. However, this, not so much a however, it's just the curiosity. Does that get turned into a billable hour, all that activity around the iPad?
Yeah, that's something that, through the chair to Councillor Roberts, that I can certainly look into that. The first thing that comes to mind, we've got Festive Ride coming up, and if the officers are being proactive and they have free time and they're not being tied up with calls for service, if they set up a ride program, is the municipality being billed for that? That's something I don't know, but I will make a note, sir, and I'll get you the answer.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you again for your service. It's really valued.
Thank you, sir. And I've also made a note in regards to the bylaw posting information at STAs. I'll get a hold of the human trafficking folks and see what their opinion is, and we'll get that back to the board.
Great.
Any other questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, could I have somebody move receipt of the detachment commander report? Robert, and Bill will second that.
Rudder Roberts' motion that the detachment commander report to the Prince Edward County O.P.P. Detachment Board be received.
All in favor? And we then move on to 9.8, retirement of O.P.P. Constable Karen German. Could we have one of the members put that on the floor? Go ahead, Sarah, and Casey will second that.
Perfect. Casey seconding. I move that the O.P.P. Detachment Board receive notice of Constable Karen German's retirement and recognize their years of service with the Ontario Provincial Police, and that a letter of recognition be sent by the chair of the O.P.P. Detachment Board.
Perfect. Any further no questions, comments on that? Good. All in favor? Perfect. Then go on to our 2025 schedule of meetings. Could we have somebody put that on the floor? Casey, and somebody second that. Sarah, go ahead.
Casey and Sarah, the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion regarding the 20.
Can't hear Casey.
Here we go again.
Not his fault. He has a microphone that was a bit faulty beside him, so he's got it. Yeah.
In whatever room I'm in. I move that the O.P.P. Detachment Board discussion regarding the 2025 schedule of meetings be received, seconded by Sarah.
Any questions or comments on that? Nothing? Okay, all in favor? And that carries.
Through the chair, just really quick, does anybody have any concerns with those dates? So to be clear, March 20th, 2025, June 19th, 2025, September 18th, 2025, or November 20th, 2025?
May I speak just on that?
Absolutely, Sarah, go ahead. Yes.
Okay. I do have one conflict on the date. I've just, apologies, pulling it up here. The conflict that I have is on June 19th. That meeting I will be unavailable to attend if the date is held.
So we can still proceed and just you send your regrets for that meeting, or we can make a motion to amend this schedule. Essentially, the intention of having it on the agenda is that if we want to make any changes now, then we can before we send out meeting schedule, invites, and etc.
Okay. If possible, I could do the Thursday prior, the June 12th, if there's no conflicts with other board members.
Do any other board members have any conflict with the June 12th instead? I'm just going to take a quick check at the other schedules to make sure there's no conflict on our end, and just give me one moment. Yeah, so through the chair, council does have committee of the whole on June 12th. So it might be best, Sarah, that we just remain with this schedule and you send your regrets, unfortunately.
No problem. Thank you.
You okay with that, Sarah, if we do that? Okay, thanks for
you.
letting us know. It's good to know.
Thank you.
So could we, all in favor of those dates? I think we established that. Good, okay. And our next meeting date, the potential additional O.P.P. Detachment Board meeting is scheduled 2024 pursuant to Section 67 of the Community Safety and Policing Act. And March 20th, we have 2025. So any questions, comment? Everybody's good with that? I think we've just established that. Could we have someone just move that? That'll be our next meeting date.
Sorry.
So
go ahead, Casey.
Yeah. Through the chair, Casey, do you want to?
Section 67, bracket 6.5 of the new act requires a board to hold 4 meetings. And it incorporates section 43 of the act, which says that we will only have held 3 meetings. There is no transitional provision allowing us to count meetings of the earlier Police Services Board as our meetings. So technically, we would fall 1 meeting short. This board would, unless we held an additional meeting. I would encourage us to simply do it electronically with a skeleton agenda. Part of this falls out of comments from Mr. White of the Inspector General's office about their, what I perceive to be fairly rigid intention of enforcing the new act to get everyone's attention. Not so much because of our board, but some boards have shown kind of a certain looseness about compliance with certain provisions. So this would keep us on side, and that would be what I would move, that at the chair's arrangement, a date be set for a further meeting of this board before December 31st with a relatively modest agenda.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Yeah, through the chair, I do appreciate your comments, Casey. I will point out that in 2024, the Prince Edward County held 3 meetings as a police service board and 3 as an O.P.P. detachment board. And while I can appreciate that there's no transitional provision, I do feel the board has demonstrated due diligence on satisfying that requirement. However, should the board wish to proceed with scheduling additional before the end of 2024, I do have a few dates that we can consider, and to Casey's point, can be strictly virtual with limited agenda.
Could it be held at a board member's cidery?
It's kind of cold. Thank you, Madam Clerk, so you feel we're okay?
I think, sorry, through the chair, I think it could be argued that we have demonstrated our due diligence to satisfy the requirement. I also have awareness of other O.P.P. detachment boards that are just coming up and being established relatively recently, and that they would not be satisfying this requirement. However, it's up to the board how they wish to proceed.
How about you, Casey? What would you like to do? I'm fine either way.
I think it's technical, but I think we should do it.
Okay. I'd be fine with that if we schedule something based on the parameters that you've suggested.
Yes.
Yeah.
So through the chair to the board, I do have a motion drafted. Now we just have to schedule a date. I did consult further with the detachment commander. He said only December 5th or the 12th are available on his end. And then from a clerk's office perspective, the 5th is probably too soon. So if we were to proceed and December 12th works for everybody, if everybody just wants to take a quick peek.
Yeah, we have county budget during that week, so the 5th would be completely out for me and Bill. But the 12th would probably be.
So the 12th, if everybody's okay with that, we can proceed with that date.
Sure.
Okay, and then the motion would read that an additional O.P.P. detachment board meeting be scheduled for December 12th, 2024 pursuant to section 67.6.5 of the Community Safety and Policing Act and be conducted as a virtual electronic meeting.
Okay, Casey moved that, seconded by Bill. All in favor? Okay, could we have someone move adjournment? Bill, and someone second, Sarah. Just read out the adjournment. What's the time we have, Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, 12:14.
12:14.
That the meeting now adjourn at 12:14 p.m. Seconded by Sarah, and I bet it's going to be unanimous.
All, I did, Casey put his hand up right away. There we go. Yeah, we're good.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Mr.